Naupaka was the youngest princess of her island, known for her calm spirit and a gentle smile that always made people feel safe. She lived in a grand home near the ocean where the waves rolled in like peaceful breaths. Even though she was surrounded by comfort, Naupaka often felt a strange longing, as if something important waited beyond the familiar shores of her kingdom. Every morning, she walked along the beach before the rest of the court woke up. She liked watching the sky change colors, quietly shifting from pale blue to bright gold. On one of those early walks, she saw a young fisherman pulling his canoe out of the water. He was strong, but moved with the kind of patience that came from understanding the ocean deeply. His name was Cowie. Cowie noticed her at the same moment. He froze, surprised to see the princess standing only a few steps away. He bowed, unsure what else to do, but Naupaka smiled and told him there was no need for that. She asked if the morning had been good for fishing. Cowie, flustered, answered honestly. It had been peaceful, but the fish had been stubborn. Her quiet laugh drifted like wind over calm water. It was soft, warm, and completely disarming. From that day on, their paths crossed often. At first by accident, then by intention. Cowie would bring her small shells he found while diving. Naupaka would tell him stories her grandmother had told her about the stars. They talked about simple things, yet the time always felt heavy with meaning, as if every moment held a promise neither of them dared speak aloud. Even though they came from different worlds, Naupaka felt at ease around him. She never had to pretend, never had to measure her words the way she often did around the court. Cowie treated her with respect, but not fear. He looked at her like she was human, not a symbol. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, their feelings deepened. They walked along the shore without needing conversation. Sometimes they sat under a palm tree, watching the tide roll in and out. Sometimes they spoke about their dreams. Naupaka imagined a future where she lived freely. Cowie imagined a life where love meant more than status. But the island had traditions. A princess could not choose a fisherman. The elders believed that someone born into royalty carried duties far greater than personal desire. Naupaka and Cowie knew that. Still, the quiet affection between them grew, forming roots that no rule could easily break. One evening, after a long day of court duties, Naupaka escaped to the shoreline, hoping for peace. She found Cowie waiting, holding a small woven basket filled with fresh fruit. He explained that he had spent the day thinking about her, hoping to brighten her mood. She sat beside him, grateful for the simplicity he offered. As the sun set, their shoulders brushed. The light around them glowed soft and gold. Something in the air shifted. Without planning to, Naupaka took his hand. Cowie held it like it was something precious. That simple touch changed everything. They both understood the risk. If the elders discovered their growing bond, there would be consequences. Yet neither of them could bring themselves to step back. For the first time, their lives felt entirely their own. A few days later, rumors reached Naupaka's relatives. Servants whispered that the princess spent too many mornings by the shore. A few claimed they saw her laughing with the fishermen. The whispers grew until the elders demanded answers. Naupaka refused to lie. She admitted she cared for Cowie, though she could barely speak the words. The elders' faces hardened. They reminded her of duty, responsibility, and tradition. They explained that royalty must marry someone of equal rank to keep the balance of the kingdom. But Naupaka was young, hopeful, and in love. She begged for understanding. She argued that Cowie was kind, honest, and brave. She insisted that love should be reason enough. The elders disagreed. They forbade her from seeing Cowie. They said that her heart was creating a dangerous path, one that could upset the harmony the island had maintained for generations. Naupaka left the meeting in tears, her heart heavy with both anger and heartbreak. She ran toward the ocean, the only place she felt she could breathe. Cowie saw her coming and rushed to her side. Through trembling words, she explained everything. Cowie listened quietly, though each sentence struck him like a wave crashing too hard against a fragile shore. He had always feared this moment. But instead of stepping away, he reached for her hands. He told her he did not regret loving her. He said that even if the world tried to pull them apart, the truth of what they felt would remain. The sun had nearly disappeared when Naupaka whispered, "Then we must try. We must speak to the gods." And so they decided to climb the sacred mountain to ask for guidance, unknowingly setting in motion a story the island would never forget. The sacred mountain stood at the heart of the island, rising tall and silent above forests, cliffs, and deep valleys. People said it was the place where the gods listened closest, where prayers traveled far and fast. But only those with great need dared to climb it. Naupaka and Cowie knew the journey would not be easy, yet the fear of being separated felt far heavier. They left at dawn, hoping to stay unseen. Mist wrapped around the path like a soft veil. The air smelled fresh, cool, filled with the scent of ferns and wild orchids. Birds called in the distance, their cries echoing through the trees. The climb began gently, but soon the path became steep and uneven. Naupaka lifted her long skirt to keep it from catching on branches. Cowie walked ahead where needed, steadying her when the rocks grew slippery. Even while struggling with the climb, there was a warmth in being together. They spoke rarely, saving their breath, but their silence felt comfortable. Naupaka kept thinking about the elders' stern faces, their harsh words. Each memory tightened her chest as if someone were squeezing her heart. She tried to shake off the worry, telling herself that the gods had always been fair. If love mattered at all, surely they would see the truth in her plea. Cowie, on the other hand, carried a quieter fear. He knew he was asking too much of fate. Loving a princess was daring enough. Asking the gods to rewrite tradition was even bolder. But every time he looked back at Naupaka, he felt strength rising inside him. She followed without complaint, her determination bright as sunlight through the trees. For her, he would face anything. Hours passed. They reached the midway point of the mountain where a small clearing opened up. A freshwater spring trickled from a crack in the rock, forming a shallow pool. They rested beside it. Naupaka washed her hands in the cool water and closed her eyes, listening to the gentle flow. Cowie shared what little food he had packed. It wasn't much, but sharing it made it feel enough. As they ate, clouds began drifting lower, gathering in thick silver layers around the peak. The air grew cooler. Naupaka pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Cowie noticed and offered to give her his, but she refused softly, reminding him that he needed warmth too.
Still, he draped it over her shoulders when she wasn't noticing. She pretended not to notice, though her heart warmed at the small act of care. Their journey continued. The path narrowed, winding around cliffs that dropped sharply into valleys below. The wind picked up, blowing Naupaka's hair across her face. Kau'i held her hand tightly to steady her. Step by step, they pressed onward. Their shared determination felt almost like a third presence walking alongside them. By late afternoon, they reached a ridge just below the summit. Here, ancient stone markers stood in a circle. Some were cracked by time, others covered in moss. This was the place where people came to speak to the gods, where the air felt heavy with old prayers and forgotten hopes. Naupaka and Kau'i approached the center of the circle. The wind quieted, as if even nature paused to listen. Naupaka kneeled first, her eyes closed, her hands clasped. She spoke softly, her voice trembling with emotion. She asked the gods for permission to love freely. She explained that Kau'i was not trying to take anything from her kingdom or disrupt tradition, only trying to hold her heart with honesty. She begged for guidance, for clarity, for compassion. When she finished, she remained kneeling, shoulders shaking. Kau'i placed a gentle hand on her back, then lifted his gaze to the sky. He didn't kneel. Instead, he stood tall and spoke plainly. He said he knew his place in the world, and he respected it. But he also knew that love did not choose based on rank or rule. He asked the gods not for privilege, but for fairness. If they believed he was unworthy of Naupaka, he would accept it. But he begged them to consider the truth of their bond, the sincerity of their hearts. As the last words left his mouth, a sudden wind swept through the stones. The air turned cold. Clouds above twisted into dark spirals. Naupaka and Kau'i exchanged worried glances. The sky rumbled with distant thunder. Then a voice, neither loud nor quiet, echoed in the air around them. It felt ancient, like wind over mountains, like waves breaking on distant shores. You ask for what cannot be changed. The words struck them both at once. Naupaka felt her breath catch. Kau'i felt his heart drop. The voice continued. The balance of the island must remain. A princess cannot marry one who is not of her rank. Your love, though sincere, defies the path set before you. Naupaka protested through tears. She begged them to reconsider. She insisted that love should matter more than tradition. But the gods did not bend. You may not be together as lovers, but your bond is real, and real bonds shape the world. The wind shifted again, this time swirling around Naupaka. Her long hair lifted, her shawl fluttered. The air smelled suddenly of wildflowers. The god spoke once more. To honor what you feel, we will give your love a place in the world. But you must accept separation. The sky brightened briefly like a flash of white light. Then something small, delicate, and glowing drifted before Naupaka. It looked like a tiny flower bud split cleanly in half. One half for the mountain, one half for the shore. As you are parted, so shall the blossom be. The light faded. The sky calmed. The wind stilled. Naupaka stared at the half-blossom in her hands. It was beautiful and heartbreaking at once. Kau'i stepped closer, his face pale with grief. The gods had spoken, and nothing would ever be the same.
Naupaka held the half-blossom gently, as if it were something fragile enough to crumble under a breath. Its small petals curved inward, soft and pale, glowing faintly as though carrying the last light of the fading sky. Kauai stepped closer, but he didn't touch it. He knew it was a gift from the gods, and he sensed it was also a message, one that carried far more weight than its size suggested. The world around them grew strangely quiet. The rustle of leaves softened. The usual chatter of birds fell silent. The sacred mountain seemed to hold its breath. Naupaka lowered her gaze, tears gathering and slipping down her face without sound. She tried to form words, to find something meaningful, something strong, but her throat felt locked. Naupaka finally reached for her hand. When their fingers touched, Naupaka squeezed tightly as if she could hold back time through sheer force of will. "We can speak to them again," she whispered, her voice barely steady. Kauai shook his head gently. "They've given their answer." She shook her head in frustration, unable to accept it. All the hope she carried during their climb had cracked open. But even through her heartbreak, she sensed truth in what he said. The voice of the gods had carried no cruelty, just finality. The sun dipped lower behind the mountains, brushing gold onto the stone circle around them. Shadows stretched long and thin. Naupaka felt cold even though the evening air was still warm. She lifted the half-blossom again and stared at it. "If they will not let us be together," she said softly, "then what is the point of this?" Kauai took a moment before he answered. "Maybe they wanted to show that our love is real, even if we can't stay together the way we hoped." Naupaka closed her eyes and fought fresh tears. She wanted to protest again, but she understood the message clearly. The gods hadn't just refused their love, they had created a space between them, carved deliberately, a space they could not cross. Kauai reached out and brushed a tear from her cheek. His touch was gentle, respectful, filled with everything he couldn't say out loud. "You'll be all right," he whispered. "I've seen the strength in everyone." "I don't feel strong," she said. "You are. I felt it every day." She swallowed hard. "And you?" He gave a small, sad smile. "I'll learn to be strong too." The path sloped downward again, and they walked the rest in silence. When they reached the base of the mountain, they stopped. This was the place where the forest met the village roads, where the world shifted from sacred earth to ordinary life. This was where they had to part. Naupaka took a shaky breath, then gently placed her half of the blossom in Kauai's hands. It sat lightly in his palm, glowing faintly under the moonlight. "Keep it," she whispered. "Please." Kauai closed his fingers around it, holding it like a heartbeat. "I'll never lose it," he promised. Their eyes lingered on each other for a long, quiet moment. Then Naupaka stepped back. Kauai stepped away, and the distance between them began its long, painful growth. Naupaka watched Kauai walk toward the distant shoreline until he disappeared from sight. The night had fully settled by then, stretching dark and star-filled over the island. She stood motionless at the edge of the forest, feeling a deep ache settle in her chest. Even when she finally turned back toward her village, her steps felt unsteady, as if her heart were still halfway between the mountain and the sea. She returned to the royal grounds long after the torches had been lit. Guards opened the gates, surprised to see her disheveled, her shawl dusty, and her hair tangled from the long climb. The elders emerged quickly, relieved she was safe, but stern in their expressions. They asked where she had been, why she had disappeared, and whether she had spoken again to Kauai. Naupaka answered with honesty.
She told them she had climbed the sacred mountain and spoken with the gods. She said she had asked for their blessing. And she said, her voice steady, that the gods had refused. The elders nodded as though they had expected that outcome, but when she lifted the half blossom, still glowing faintly in her palm, even they fell silent. The elders recognized it instantly, a divine sign, a symbol the island had never seen before. Naupaka held the half blossom close. "The gods have separated us," she said quietly, "but they have also marked our love." The elders did not challenge her. They escorted her inside, speaking in hushed tones about duty, destiny, and divine messages. But Naupaka barely heard them. All she could think about was Kaiui walking toward the ocean, carrying the other half of the blossom in his hand. In the days that followed, Naupaka returned to her duties as princess. She listened to petitions, helped settle disputes, and walked the royal gardens when she needed quiet. But something had changed inside her. The longing she once felt was now painted with grief. And even though she carried herself with grace, the courtiers sensed that her spirit had grown softer, quieter in a way no one could quite name. She kept the half blossom on a small woven tray in her room. It never wilted, never dulled. Its soft glow reminded her of the mountain air, the divine wind that had swirled around her, and the moment everything in her life had shifted. Sometimes she held it close and whispered Kaiui's name, not as a call, but as a memory she wished to protect. Meanwhile, Kaiui returned to the village by the sea. The fishermen welcomed him back, unaware of what had happened on the mountain. He tried his best to fall back into the rhythm of daily life. He repaired nets. He paddled his canoe before dawn. He dove deep into the water, retrieving shells and seaweed and small gifts from the coral beds. But he felt hollow. The ocean's waves no longer filled him with peace. Every sound of the tide seemed to echo Naupaka's voice, calling from somewhere far beyond his reach. He kept his half-blossom in a small wooden bowl beside his sleeping mat. Each night he looked at it, letting its soft glow calm him. He imagined Naupaka holding the other half in her hands. He imagined her looking through her window toward the sea. That belief alone helped him get through the hardest nights. Weeks passed, then months. The island moved forward, as islands always do, shaped by waves and wind and the turning of seasons. But the space between the lovers never closed. The gods had spoken clearly. Their bond would last only in spirit, not in presence. One morning, Naupaka walked through the royal gardens with her attendants trailing quietly behind her. She paused near a cluster of shrubs, where long green leaves reached upward like gentle arms. Something caught her eye. A small new blossom had appeared on the shrub, white and delicate, but only half-formed, as though the other half had gone missing. Her breath stilled. Her hand trembled as she reached out to touch it. The attendants, confused, stepped closer. They asked what she saw, but Naupaka hardly heard them. She whispered to herself, "A flower split in two." Word spread quickly. The strange new blossoms grew only near the mountain slopes where Naupaka spent much of her time. People began calling them Naupaka blossoms, named after the princess who prayed for impossible love. Meanwhile, by the shoreline, Kaiui returned from the sea with his canoe. As he dragged it across the sand, something unusual caught his attention. A low shrub grew near the rocks, one he had never noticed before. On its branches were small blossoms, half-formed, just like the one on the mountain. Kaiui knelt in the sand, staring at the flower as though seeing a message carved into nature. The wind brushed past him, carrying the faint scent of salt and distant rain. He closed his eyes and let himself imagine Naupaka seeing a blossom at the same moment, miles away on the mountain. As time went on, Naupaka blossoms spread across the island, always in two kinds, the mountain Naupaka and the beach Naupaka. Each blossom was half a flower. Only together, mountain and sea, did they form a whole. Islanders began telling the story to their children, a story of two lovers separated by duty and divine command, their love immortalized in the petals of a split flower. Naupaka herself grew older, carrying grace in every step. She often visited the mountain slopes, sitting among the half-flowers, her shawl fluttering softly in the wind. She would close her eyes and imagine Kaiui walking near the ocean, his feet pressed into the wet sand, the breeze touching his hair. Kaiui aged too, weathered by salt and sun, still diving, still paddling the canoe that had once carried him across quiet waters. When he felt lonely, he would visit the beach Naupaka blossoms, letting their gentle fragrance surround him. Though they never met again, the islanders believed their spirits stayed close. When the mountain winds blew toward the sea, people said Naupaka's heart was reaching for Kaiui. And when the waves climbed high and sent their spray drifting inland, they said Kaiui was sending his love back to her. And so the legend lived on. Two halves of a flower, two hearts that never stopped longing, two lovers kept apart by the gods, but held together in the world they left behind. Their love became a story carried by petals, wind, waves, and time. A reminder that some bonds, even when broken by fate, never truly fade.